Hi Swifties, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you're new, I am the Taylor Swiftologist, and on this channel, I like to take an analytical and critical look at the public life and persona of Taylor Swift and other artists and other pop culture topics that are yet to be revealed to you. If you like this kind of raw and unfiltered approach to discussing cultural topics of relevance, I suggest that you subscribe to my channel so that you stay updated on what I do next. And if you like this video, you should leave a like and also a comment. I'm always pulling suggestions on what kind of videos to make from the comment section. Today, we are going to be talking about Taylor Swift's best album, arguably. It's Speak Now. And Speak Now, I think, is one of those albums that tends to get overlooked, in favor of the more commercially successful and memorable records like 1989 or Folklore even. But Speak Now was truly a kind of novelty in the Taylor Swift discography. There is truly no other album like it. And if you're not familiar, I'm a longtime Swiftie. In fact, I have a podcast going back through all the years of her career called The Evolution of a Snake, which you should check out if you're interested in. We are just about to release 2015 Part 2, which will be very juicy. But anyway, I have been around the block in the Taylor Swift fandom. I have been there for every album release since Speak Now, actually. So I'm familiar with the journey that she has taken and the reception she has received while she kind of gets into these transitional phases, these growing pains, how people perceive her and how that changes over time. Speak Now is one of those records that I think really cemented her as a songwriter and as a force to be taken seriously in the music industry beyond like a passing trend or a teenage artist who was bound to just kind of slowly drop off the face of the earth. Speak Now was a reorientation. It was her mission statement. She was letting the world know that she was good at her craft, and she was determined to prove the people who said that she wasn't or were convinced that she must have had some man behind her scheming everything wrong. She wanted to show that she was the talented ingenue that she was, is, and always will be. So Speak Now has a special place in my heart because I feel like it is our most unfiltered and direct access to her brain, her personal memory box. Ever since we've had very filtered records, which makes sense to me. She's learned over time slowly to protect her privacy, but fortunately for us, Speak Now was not that time. And if anything, Speak Now kind of was the start of a lot of the public interrogation of her love life and her career as it pertained to her different romantic relationships. Now, she is partly responsible for encouraging that dynamic, as you will see as we go through the record and discuss all the different kinds of songs. One thing to note especially is the secret messages throughout these songs. So if you're not familiar, in all of her albums, I think until Reputation, Taylor had liner notes. So in the back of in the lyric sheet or in the back of the album somewhere, you could see there were certain letters capitalized or bolded throughout the lyrics of a song that would add up to spell out a secret message. More often than not, that message was a clue as to who the song was about. Sometimes it was just a funny little takeaway or a comment, but a lot of the times it was some juice, okay? And this led us to very quickly determine, because she's not subtle, who these songs were about. And that kind of became a public sport, was trying to guess and fill in the blanks. And I think she regretted setting that precedent once it kind of overwhelmed her and actually started negatively impacting her life beyond her career as a musician. So all of her albums are made in response to criticism. So I guess we can start by talking about where Taylor was in the writing process of Speak Now. She was hot off the heels of Fearless, which was a runaway commercial success. Honestly, a surprise, given that she came from a small and scrappy label. She wasn't backed by a huge label that had a huge publishing arm. She did a lot of boots on the ground, connecting with the fans on MySpace and on the internet. She was one of the first artists to really make use of that kind of interpersonal relationship, that parasocial relationship that you can develop with your fans. Taylor has always been good at leveraging that, and that's kind of how Fearless became the success that it was. She did a lot of the groundwork in the debut era, but Fearless is really where she saw massive commercial and critical success. She was also bolstered by a couple of public personal problems. So for example, the Kanye West incident at the VMAs, her very public breakup with Joe Jonas and Taylor Lautner. She quickly learned that as a songwriter, a diaristic, confessional teenage songwriter, that her power and her strength was being able to turn the pen on her enemies. And I think that in this time, she kind of set up the two poles, the two tonalities that her writing often swings between. I think everything that she has ever written can be categorized in either one of these two poles. The first one is swooning. So that's falling over herself in love. She's infatuated. She's high off her own supply or the supply of someone else, and the other is scolding. All of her songs fall somewhere on the spectrum between swooning and scolding. You can debate which ones go where, but I'm telling you, you can shoehorn them into either end of that spectrum if you really try hard enough. So these are the kind of things that guide her. I think I've mentioned in prior videos that at this time in her life, Taylor had a very black and white view of what was right and what was wrong. Fearless was an album full of binaries where she talked a lot about how other people wronged her and how they should have acted instead, or how things played out in fairy tales and how those fairy tales should or could be applied to real life. Speak Now is a real Bildungsroman. I'm probably not saying that correctly, but this is a literary term which describes a story that is about a coming of age, and Speak Now is a coming of age record. This is really a growing pain, a transitional time where she's between being an adolescent and growing up and being a proper adult and learning how to navigate through the world without a childlike sense of wonder, which she has always retained to some extent. But this album, Speak Now, has a lot of subtle maturity and character development on it that I think kind of gets at how she's been able to very gracefully age herself throughout the years. We often look at artists like Miley Cyrus who have very jarring transitions between being a Disney star and doing things like swinging on a wrecking ball naked. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that or that Taylor is better than anybody who does that, but I think she had a more graceful descent into being an adult that has a multitude of desires, feelings, approaches, and perspectives. And Speak Now was kind of the start of that. It was a graceful easing into her becoming a woman rather than a teenage girl. And you hear a lot of confusion on this record. The boundaries of right and wrong are not as clear as they once were, though she does still try to shoehorn them occasionally. But she is living in a gray area. She's saying things that she's never said before. She's admitting things that maybe she wouldn't say in an interview. This is an extremely confessional album. I mean, the meaning all comes from the name, Speak Now. She initially wanted to call it Enchanted when she was in the middle of the writing process, but Scott Borchetta, may he never find peace again, correctly suggested to her that that sounded a little immature for the direction that the album was headed in. He wanted her to call it Speak Now instead. And as a organizational device or a structural literary tool, it works really well in this instance because all of these songs, as she has said in her letters about Speak Now to the fans, these songs are confessions to people, things that she maybe didn't say or wished that she had said. And, she's encouraging people to speak up and speak now and say what you feel and mean in the moment. And that is something that I can really get behind, especially as a fellow writer. Writers have an instinct to observe, watch, and process and translate later down on the page. So this album is really kind of a challenge to Taylor herself to be more direct, to be more honest. She leaves no stone unturned, and she is extremely clear about who she's writing to and what she's writing about. Again, I think it's a level of access that we haven't had before and probably won't have ever again, which is what makes this album so special. And I think that sometimes this album can be considered forgettable because it didn't have a radio single, right? This was an impressive body of work because it was intended to be that, a body of work. All of the songs are supposed to be considered together in conversation with one another. With albums like 1989, you have records, big hits like Style, Shake It Off, Blank Space, that can exist outside of the context of the album's framework and the message that the artist was trying to impart on the listener. Speak Now is one of those albums that is better when consumed as a whole. If you just pick songs out randomly at one at a time, it can feel a little like a regression. A critique that she often received when she put out Speak Now was all of her songs sound the same. And I can kind of see where people are coming from with that perspective, but I encourage everyone, obviously, to listen to the lyrics. The sameness and the likeness of her musical production style is definitely due to her collaborative partners on this record. So she worked mostly on the production with Nathan Chapman, a close collaborator of hers. And something to note about Taylor is that she keeps her circle of people that she collaborates with very small. That's not to say that she doesn't branch out and try writing with other people. It's just that she's extremely selective on who gets to filter her ideas and her sound, and who gets to kind of have a hand in shaping the Taylor Swift lexicon. And Nathan Chapman was an extremely important figure in the beginning part of her career. He standardized a kind of musical arrangement, a focus on live instruments, and a keen attention to harmony and arrangement that I think Taylor, didn't naturally have as a musician. The best producers for Taylor are those who don't really interfere with her process, and she has production credits all the way throughout Speak Now. And Nathan Chapman was very clear in many interviews and said that this is not a vanity credit. This was really, truly a dialogue and a collaboration. Taylor had a heavy hand in creating the soundscape of this album. Another really important characteristic of this album is all of the songs were written by her, and this addresses something that I think is very interesting about Taylor and her career in general, is that most of her albums come about as a response to a criticism of her prior work. So when Fearless came out, out and it was a runaway success. She was writing with Liz Rose. She was writing with a couple of other co-writers. And a lot of the men, to be frank, in the music industry that were reviewing her work were skeptical or dubious about whether or not she was actually involved in the creation of these tracks, or not even if she was involved, but to what extent she was involved in the process. Was there a team of hit makers behind her writing these insanely catchy pop melodies? It was kind of a misogynistic undertone, saying, of course a teenage girl couldn't write something that good. She must have assistance or help. And so for Speak Now, she decided, well, watch, I'm going to do it by myself, and you're going to absolutely gag and choke on your breakfast, because I'm going to shake the table. I'm going to show you that I can not only write by myself, but I can progress. I can advance, I can mature, and they weren't expecting that. So Speak Now really was a critical success. It was also a commercial success. It wasn't her most successful album. What's really exciting about this being written totally by Taylor is, again, that it's unfiltered and raw access to her brain. Most of these songs are rambunctious. They sprawl. They go on forever. They could probably use a little bit of editing, but the beauty of them all when you view them together is that they are stories. Incomplete, sometimes confusing, sometimes off the wall, but detailed, wonderful, violent, expressive statements of specific emotions or confessions and feelings that she's always wanted to say but hasn't been able to put into words that come out of her mouth in a conversation. Many of these songs crash in at over 4 or 5 minutes long, even going up to as long as 6 minutes. We haven't really had an album that had a consistent lengthiness like this ever since. So what I'm trying to impart to you is that Speak Now is beautifully unique, and it is a one-of-a-kind record that really can't be compared to anything else. I would say that this is also probably her last credible attempt at a pop country album. Calling anything beyond Speak Now pop country, like Red, is a little bit dishonest. But this album still maintains a lot of the hallmarks of country music that make her writing so successful in the first place. The focus on narrative, the winding stories, the different characters. We do see a lot of different perspective shifting on this album as well. She's maturing as a songwriter, not just as a young woman. She is trying her hand at writing different kinds of stories from different points of view. She has always tried to do this from the debut with Mary's Song and other songs of that nature. She kind of delves into fantasy and mystery and enchantment. This album has incredible world making. You can live inside this album. I don't really know if that makes sense, but I think that you'll get it if you feel as connected to this album as I do. And the Speak Now tour kind of replicates that complete immersion that the listener feels when they listen to this album. This is a place where anything could happen, where your wildest dreams could come true and everything could fall apart the very next day. It's similar to life, but a little bit more romantic and put through a filtered lens. A lot of these songs were also written in isolation. She wrote a lot of Speak Now on the tour bus while she was touring Fearless for a very long period of time. I believe that tour was 1.5 years, if not 18 months long. So a tour bus is an isolating, lonely place to be. You're constantly in a liminal space. You're between one place and another. You can kind of lose track of yourself. And what better way to hammer down into how you're feeling and who you are than by writing these long, winding confessional songs completely by yourself? So the fact that Taylor was able to achieve this at the age of like 19 and 20 years old really solidifies the fact that she's a preternaturally talented artist. It's not just that she's good and media trained or that she is adept at communicating half-baked thoughts or music or moments. She can make magic from start to finish. And the only reason why this album was successful and the reason why it worked without the radio singles was because of the quality of the work. The fans connected to this massively. Her numbers did not suffer. She sold more tickets and she went on a bigger tour this time around. And that really speaks to the power of her pen and the development of her talent. And if you know anything about me and my other videos, I am always here to see the career progression. I love to see her trying something new and pushing herself out of her comfort zone, which is certainly what she did on this album. So now we can delve right into the album. I'm going to go through each of the songs, talk about their secret message, and discuss how they contribute to the album as a whole and how they sound as standalone songs by themselves, and what kind of messages I took away or lessons I learned from these songs as I've lived with them for many years. I am of course going to be going into the deluxe version of this album because the bonus tracks are simply magnificent. So we start off with Mine, which is also coincidentally the first single off of Speak Now. And I remember when this came out, I was so thrilled because it feels like a very logical, continuous link from Fearless towards Speak Now. And the subtle maturation that I mentioned earlier, that casual growing up that is neither in your face nor too much at once, is really evident on this song. song. So I don't think that this song is about anyone in particular, though the secret message might have you believing that this is so. The secret message for this song is Toby, which is obviously alluding to her co-star in the music video, British actor Toby Hemingway. She's always had a thing for those London boys. This song is about something both more related to her and abstract. It's about the idea of running away from love. In an interview, she said, "Mine is about the idea that I could find someone who would be the exception to running away from love, someone who would be so sturdy and so much of a sure thing that I wouldn't run. I look back on a lot of examples that I've seen of love long term, and a lot of times it doesn't work out. There are goodbyes and people really get hurt, so I tend to be a little runaway-ish, but I'm never past hoping that at some point that could change." It kind of speaks to her, both her tension of being a hopeless romantic and also a skeptic. And I think that there's something to analyze here about the way in which that her parents' relationship, which, if I remember correctly, was disintegrating at this time, informed her view of love and her outlook and her anxiety about finding something that will last. It is kind of a folklorish song in that I think that she really wanted to explore the development of a fictional relationship. She probably watched a movie or read a book and said, I want to try and envisage how finding my soulmate could eventually somehow work out looking. And throughout this album, she manages to keep some very interesting lyrics in there. There's a drawer of my things at your place would be one of the most outstanding ones, meaning that she spent the night and slept over. That's a lot coming from the virginal Christian girl who basically refused to say what her kind of journey into adulthood would look like beyond being a princess riding on a white horse. This song is truly beautiful, and the arrangement is wonderful too. It's rich, it's luscious, the live instruments really do it for me. There's a noted development on the vocals, and the chorus is an earworm that is written so wonderfully. I remember a review that I read, I think it was from Rolling Stone of this track, that said only Taylor Swift could have a throwaway line like, "You made a rebel of a careless man's careful daughter," that means so much as something that was just a blip in the song. Really, it's just a moment that we skip over. But I think that speaks to the quality of the writing on this song, and the vocal arrangement is wonderful as well. The high notes at the end are excellent, and the visuals did leave something to be desired in that on YouTube there is still no high definition version of this. It has been potato quality for a very long time, but the visual kind of introduces us to the world of Speak Now. It's whimsical. She's on the beach. She's frolicking in the forest like a nymph with pictures hanging from a clothing line. It's all very whimsical and magical, which is definitely kind of the aura and the air that Speak Now was imparting on the listener. This is one of my personal favorite Taylor Swift songs, and as a thesis statement for an album, which is what a lead single should be, right? It's introducing the world to this new evolution of your art. As a thesis statement for Speak Now, it hits all the marks of what made us love her from debut and Fearless, but also introduces us to something new, which is this freewheeling, long, stream of consciousness kind of writing. And it also employs the same narrative trick that Love Story has, that kind of telling a story, doing a twist at the end, having a little key change in the bridge towards the last chorus. It's both familiar and subtly challenging. Up next, track 2, we have Sparks Fly. And Sparks Fly is an interesting addition on this record because it was not written during the Speak Now writing sessions. The secret message in Sparks Fly is Portland, Oregon, which is indicative of where she met the object of her affection that she's writing this song about. She met him, this guy called Jake, in a bar after she played a show in Portland, Oregon when she was 16 years old. The original version is structurally similar to the version that we know from Speak Now, but there are some lyrical changes, mostly in the verses. The first verse says, "You say my name for the first time, baby, and I fall in love in an empty bar." In general, I'd say the writing was a leveling up. You can go and look at the original lyrics if you would like to hear more about what it was intended to sound like when she wrote it at 16. Up until Speak Now, we had been asking, begging, pleading with Taylor to put this on an album, and to appease us, as she let us know in the live chat for Speak Now before it was released, to appease us, she was going to put Sparks Fly on the record. And I think that this was executed in such a faithful and incredible way. Also, the minor lyrical revisions do allow it to fit more cohesively on Speak Now. She has changed some of the clunkier phrasing and cleaned it up a little bit. But this song is a sexy song. This is one of her first sexy songs. I think that it's subtly sexy. There's a lot of natural elements in it. The way you move is like a full-on rainstorm, and I'm a house of cards. She is crumbling. She is falling apart in the presence, in the hormonal attraction that she's having to this person. A lot of people have speculated that this song is about her losing her virginity. I don't care to speculate on that. It feels a little invasive, but I can see where they're coming from when they make that assertion. Winning numbers ever. As the starting track to the Speak Now tour, I encourage you to look it up if you haven't seen it before. It is mind-blowing. It's wonderful. It is literally like watching a princess rise up from under the stage and throw her beautiful curls around in a gorgeous, great gown, beautiful gown, gold dress. Back to December is our third track, and this one comes in at a whopping almost 5 minutes long. This song, again, was a different perspective and a reorientation of Taylor's point of view as an artist. Back to December was the second single from Speak Now, and it was very well received by critics. The secret message is Tay, which I think very conclusively leads us to the fact that this song is an apology to Taylor Lautner, her boyfriend at the time in 2009, and the other half of Taylor Squared. She had long been criticized for not ever really taking the blame for anything that went wrong in her relationships. And I mean, that was kind of a stupid criticism, because why should she talk badly about herself in her own art? But she managed to kind of gracefully incorporate a regret, a wistful longing, and a sincere sorriness for treating someone carelessly. It is a beautiful, kind of like a summary ballad. I don't really know how to describe it in a way that will get that across, but there's like a mandolin, there's plucking sounds. I can almost hear like crickets kind of being in the soundscape behind it. It's sweltering, it's a bit suffocating. And I would like to point to the writing on this song to kind of get at how she can really create this kind of confessional intimacy that she's used as the organizing tool for Speak Now. She starts out the song with, "I'm so glad you made time to see me. How's life? Tell me, how's your family? I haven't seen them in a while." You're instantly kind of pulled into the perspective. You know that she's apologizing. You know she's making up for something. You know that there's a distance between these two people that once loved each other so greatly. And the fact that she's kind of able to do that right off the bat, again, shows that she has been working on her craft and exploring new ways to enter her familiar territory, which is writing about getting heartbroken, or in this case, breaking someone else's heart. She mentions quite clearly in interviews about this album that this song is about her doing something wrong, her treating someone without care. And that is very out of character for her at this time, because as we know, she was the moral arbiter of the universe. She was telling people how they should or shouldn't behave, what they shouldn't be sorry for. And this moment is her really, having that adult realization that you will not act perfectly. You will not treat everyone that you love with the utmost care and respect. Sometimes you're going to mess up and you're going to hurt people, and they might not forgive you. And I think that that was a lesson she needed to learn, that if you yourself make a mistake, you have to be okay with apologizing and not receiving the forgiveness that you want, or not achieving the goal that you want, which might be getting back together with the person, which we can kind of see in the bridge. If the chain is on your door, I understand. She gets that she's kind of gone past the point of no return, but she's making it a point to be an honorable person and apologize anyway. That's a maturing perspective that we hadn't really seen on Fearless. So up next is Speak Now, the song, a 4-minute number, and not my personal favorite from the record. I think if you've listened to the podcast, you know how I feel about this song. But I'm trying to be objective about Speak Now, and I can see that there's only really one truly bad song on the entire record, and we're not going to get to it until much later. This is a pretty good song. Again, it's a challenge. It's her trying to write from someone else's perspective. This song is literally about interrupting someone's wedding. That moment where the priest says, "Speak now or forever hold your peace." She's the one standing up and saying, "I want to be together. I want to be with you forever." And this is a theme that she's kind of come back to in her later work, this idea that there is always that one ex who might come and request that you be with them, and you will have no choice but to say yes because you're star-crossed lovers and you were meant to be together. So this is kind of the first time that she explored that idea. The hidden message for Speak Now is you always regret what you don't say, and it's long been rumored that Taylor wrote this after she saw a friend of hers who saw her ex-boyfriend getting married. And this friend was, allegedly Hayley Williams, who attended the wedding of Josh Farrow, a former member of the band Paramore, and also her ex-boyfriend. Taylor later said that she had a dream where she was interrupting her own ex's wedding, and that was the inspiration for this song. It's unremarkable, but I think that it kind of shows another layer of her songwriting skill. Critics responded pretty well to it, but notably, she has a hard time singing this song live. The details throughout this song are really good. It's biting, it's satirical. The organ is described as sounding like a death march, and she's hiding in the curtains because she was not invited by the lovely bride-to-be. It's quite funny, it's witty, and I think that Taylor is often very funny, and that's a quality of her work that gets overlooked because people take what she says at face value. But Taylor is satirical. She can be sardonic. She's not always being earnest, though I will concede that most of the time she is. Up next, we have Dear John as a track 5, and this set the precedent for our modern conception of what a track 5 on a Taylor Swift album should do to us, how it should make us feel, what kind of depths it should plunge us into. This powerful song is also the longest on the record. It clocks in at a whopping 6 minutes and 43 seconds, and the secret message to this song is "Loved you from the very first day," which I think just kind of juxtaposes how wide-eyed and hopeful she went into this relationship as, and how beaten down and cynical and jaded she came when she was finally released from this dynamic. It is a really haunting, moving, and character-developing song. This is a truly stunning song and probably one of the best examples of why Speak Now is a standout highlight from Taylor Swift's discography. This is one of her greatest songs of all time. It's some of her best writing. It is beyond uncomfortable to listen to because of how candid and honest it is, and because of how emotive the vocal production is as well. That's something else Taylor doesn't always get credit for, is her ability to convey emotion through her voice. Though that voice might not always be so strong, it is certainly communicative of whatever desire, mood, or theme she's trying to convey to you. But the vocals are strong on this one, and the arrangement is wonderful. This is a bluegrass, bluesy, winding song. Dear John is about John Mayer, who Taylor Swift dated as a very young girl. You know, age gap relationship is not really a discourse that I care to get into, but I think what we can ascertain from this song is that it was not a good dynamic, and it didn't uplift Taylor or make her feel valued and respected. In fact, it made her feel confused and I would say gaslit probably, though that word definitely wasn't in the public lexicon very much at that time. The clever thing that she did was she wrote a song that sounds like a John Mayer song to completely lambast him and take him down. And of course, like any man, he responded very petulantly and childishly to this song. He even tried to write a song in response, but he couldn't come up with anything like this. This is truly a character assassination. In my opinion, it is a deserved character assassination. And also it touches on the dynamic between an older man and a younger woman, which is a very scandalous thing for Taylor Swift, you know, the teen pop princess who lives in a fairy tale, to discuss. This is the example of what happens when you follow your heart recklessly into a situation without thinking about the consequences. It reminds me of the line, "My mother accused me of losing my mind, but I swore that I was fine. And I should have known." Note that she says, "I should have," not "I could have" or "I would have." She should have. She maybe knew better, but she wasn't quite mature enough to understand what she was getting herself into or the way that she was setting herself up to be treated. She described this song when she was talking about it in interviews as the last email that you send to someone, you know, at the very end of your long, winding, frustrating, upsetting conversations that you have with the person that you're slowly breaking up with or phasing out of your life. This is that last ditch effort at getting everything off your chest when you have nothing to lose. And that is exactly how the song sounds. In spirit, Dear John is kind of like All Too Well, the 10-minute version, given the radical candor, the honesty, and the unflinching gaze that she's staring right at the listener. She's challenging you to step into her shoes and feel the intensity of what she's feeling. I would love to know if there is a cutting room floor version of this, similar to All Too Well, the 10-minute version, but this sounds like a complete song to me, and Taylor was pretty unfiltered with her writing process throughout this, so I think that editing was not a massive part in the writing of this album. Mean. Okay, Mean is one of those songs that I kind of cringe at as an idea, but I understand that it kind of communicates a very baseline experience that we all go through, where we feel that we are being picked on someone who's not our own size, right? Like someone's punching down and being mean to you, and all you can do, because you have no power in the situation, is just hope that one day your life will be better than theirs and that you will get the opportunity to see them and show off how much better your life is than theirs in the future. There's some interesting backstory to this song. Taylor wrote this about a blogger called Bob Lesvetz, who writes a newsletter called the Lesvetz Letter, and he has been famously critical of Taylor Swift ever since she was a young girl. And I think that this was particularly spurred on by his response to her 2010 Grammy performance with Stevie Nicks, where she sang badly. She didn't sound good. She gets nervous when she sings live performances on TV, and she kind of fumbled the bag. She was singing with Stevie Nicks. That's a high bar to clear, especially when you're a young and emerging artist. And she just didn't do a good job. And you know, when you're a public figure, you are deserving of criticism. Everybody's entitled to say what they want to say. Bob Lesvetz was a little different. He had a fixation on her. He was a middle-aged man that was very insistent that Taylor Swift, 18, 19, however old she was at the time, was worth nothing and she should be publicly humiliated and shamed all the time. There's really not much to analyze in the hidden message to this song because it's pretty obvious to anybody who hears it. But the hidden message is, "I thought you got me." I'll go on to explain kind of what this means and the relevance of the specific critic who lobbied these accusations at her that she was a bad singer or worth nothing. The description of him being someone who punches down towards her is not really fair. The man writes a blog. He's not writing for the New York Times. He's not writing for the New Yorker. He writes a blog and he says some mean things about Taylor Swift. And it's kind of fucked up the way that he's gone about doing it. But, you know, Taylor's a public figure. It's kind of part and parcel. But she's obviously entitled to say whatever she needs to say in response. And Mean is a fun, catchy little song. I do think the bridge is somewhat hypocritical, because when you get to a point where you're criticizing for someone being mean, but also calling them a liar, pathetic, and alone in life, you're kind of getting away from the target message, which is that people shouldn't be very mean to each other. But I digress. The visuals for this are very Glee. Like Glee, the TV show. I don't know how else to describe it. If there was any song on this record that had a chance of charting, it was Mean. I think it charted pretty well in comparison to the other singles on the album, following Mine. But you know, it wasn't what she thought it was. And I think that most people would agree. I think we all look back fondly on Mean, but none of us take it as a serious hallmark of her songwriting. It's kind of just something that's fun. And her performance of it at the Grammys, where she got to say, someday I'll be singing this at the Grammys, was perfect. We loved that. We loved to see it. I think the message of the song is actually interesting as well, because it's all about discarding criticism or unnecessary criticism, or being discerning about the kind of criticism that you take to heart. It's good to take constructive criticism. Taylor is an expert at this. She will always take a note from anywhere, basically. She's very sensitive, so she knows to discard certain people's opinions, and she can discern whether it's coming from a place of good faith or bad faith. So the message of the story is that, you know, there's not always something constructive to take away from someone being critical. Sometimes critical people are just being mean. Track 7 is The Story of Us, and this is another very confessional song. In a funny kind of way, The Story of Us is a sister song to Dear John. I think that this is actually the prequel to Dear John, or perhaps it's the sequel, and her feelings were just kind of temporal in Dear John to begin with. But either way, the hidden message for this song is CMT Awards, and it's a reference to an awkward run-in that she had with John Mayer at the CMT Awards when she was seated next to him soon after their breakup. It's a song about like tension and hostility and wanting to be vulnerable but not knowing how to do it in the face of anger and hostility. It's interesting because this is a repeating character. Actually, it's following the Dear John saga. So I do wonder what kinds of points she was in her journey when she wrote both of those songs, and I do wonder why she kind of laid them up on the track list in this way, because I would think that logically The Story of Us comes before Dear John, because The Story of Us is wistful, it's awkward, it's tense. It's her best attempt at a pop rock number that she's had in recent memory. You know, you could say that Haunted is a pop rock number, but Haunted is gothic. The Story of Us is her like Demi Lovato moment, I suppose. I think that this song works really well in conversation with the rest of the album, and also the fact that she chose to include it while Dear John also exists on the record shows that she's able to kind of hold multiple feelings at the same time, which is what life is all about. You're not always angry, and you're not always just sad at one time. You can be sad, angry, upset, happy, but also wistful and nostalgic too, which is I think what she was trying to kind of include by putting The Story of Us on Speak Now. So this song is about her running into John Mayer at an award show and sitting close to him and, you know, never having heard silence that was quite this loud. At this point in her career, her lyrics were particularly cutting when she was a woman scorned. You held your pride like you should have held me. I mean, remember when I said that her songs swing between swooning and scolding? This is certainly more of a scolding song at first, but it develops into a swooning or a nostalgic or a wistful song. Starts out bitter, and then she gets frustrated, and then she talks about how tiring it is to be so bitter and frustrated all the time. This is looking like a contest of who can act like they care less, but I liked it better when you were on my side. She's admitting that, you know, it's awkward and she has her defenses and her guards up, but she would lay her armor down if you'd say you'd rather love than fight. She wasn't over it when this was happening. And Taylor, you know, is a person who constantly has her hackles up and is ready to be unbothered and not caring about what people think of her, especially when that person is someone who has wronged her. So I think that we get an unfiltered look at the thought process that actually goes on in her mind. She's not always so defiant. She's not always so resolute in her commitment to hating someone or not wanting to make up with someone or holding a grudge or a vendetta. She can be multiple different complicated girls all in one song. Then we have Never Grow Up, which is another kind of interesting tonal and perspective shift. This is probably the most obvious maturing song on the record. It is about her moving out of her parents' home and moving into her own condo in Nashville and reckoning with the fact that she's not a little girl anymore. There's a really particularly terrifying existential line in this, which is, I just realized everything I have is someday going to be gone. And I think that that's a really important part of the growing up process. When you're growing up, you take things for granted. You think that the world is going to stay the same and that all of the things that you have available to you now, be it your loved ones or your resources or the feeling of being safe and secure and loved, all of those things are temporal. They may go away. Those are not guarantees. And as an adult, you learn to prioritize maintaining and tending to those things because of their capacity to go away. And I really think that that's what Taylor's trying to get at with Never Grow Up. The perspective shift can be a little bit different. She's like talking to a baby in the first verse, and then she's giving the baby advice, and then she's talking about herself. So that part of it can be confusing, but I think it's a very beautiful arrangement. It sounds like she's doing a very close-up vocal take. This is a theme that runs throughout the record. You can hear kind of her breathing, her sighing, her frustration, her sadness. I like that it feels like she's sitting on the wooden floors of her new apartment with nothing in it. Everything's in boxes, and she's playing her guitar and singing about how she's not ready to grow up yet. She doesn't know what to do. Enchanted. I mean, what can I say about Enchanted? This is probably the best song on the record, and I'll tell you why. This is a total swooning song, and it's a ridiculous song too. Enchanted is a 5-minute song about meeting someone one time, seeing them at a party, having a nice conversation, and the song really encapsulates that feeling that you have on the way home. You're wonderstruck. That's one of the best words that I've heard her use in any of her songs. It's such a peculiar word to use, and especially in this context that she lays it up in. She was wonderstruck. She blushed all the way home. She's gonna spend forever wondering if this man knew that she was enchanted to meet him. Taylor's capacity to view things in fairy tale terms is never ending. I really love that part of her childlike sense of wonder that I think she, has carried through in bits and pieces as she's gotten older. She's gotten a little bit more cynical, but I think that she still has that as a very foundational part of her character. And this shows how ridiculous she is. Like, it is insane to come up with a song like this after meeting someone one time that she obviously didn't really care about because she didn't pursue it. In fact, the man who she wrote this about, Adam Young from Owl City, wrote a very embarrassing reply song to this that she has never, to this day, acknowledged. It was highly embarrassing. So the secret message and the backstory to that secret message from Enchanted is Adam. And the Adam in question is Adam Young, who is the creative engine behind Owl City. Now, I'll let you decide whether you think that's a good creative project or not. But basically, what happened was they met once at a party after talking on the phone for a little bit of time. It was a casual chance encounter, which, adds to the heightened melodrama of the entire thing. But unfortunately, Adam decided to rewrite Enchanted and post his own version with an incredibly embarrassing letter attached. This is just a little snippet from that letter. You are a true princess from a dreamy fairy tale, a modern Cinderella. I'm terribly sorry it's taken me such a long time to reply, but I figured Valentine's Day was the perfect time to write this note to you and simply say, I was enchanted to meet you too. Love, Adam. I mean, the whole scenario was just beyond embarrassing. The bridge on this song is truly wonderful. She is duetting with a filtered vocal version of herself. This is an epic song. It's an epic ballad. It's a power ballad. Please don't be in love with someone else. Please don't have somebody waiting on you. I think we've all felt that when we've met someone and felt a connection or a spark with them. It's too soon to ask for a commitment lest you seem crazy or over-involved, but you also want them to save their heart for you. You want them not to move on. You want time to stand still, and you want to give this moment it deserves and never stay away from it. My only criticism of Enchanted is that we didn't get a visual for it. This is an extremely apt song to adapt with a music video. In hindsight, it has really become the standout song from Speak Now. It recently had a resurgence on TikTok. And, the closest thing we got to it was the Wonderstruck commercial, which was beautiful, but, not exactly what I needed from a video of Enchanted. Do you know what I mean? This is an insane song about Taylor's entire perspective in life. To meet everything with the utmost joy and wide-eyed excitement and enchantment until the circumstances prove otherwise to be terrible. Better than revenge. It's hard to go to the mat for this song, but I'm gonna try. I think that this song is fun. I mean, I think I said earlier that The Story of Us was her pop rock moment, but I guess Better Than Revenge is. It always came across as a little bit inauthentic at this point in her career when Taylor tried to be really cutting or sassy. She's most scornful when she's not putting on airs and graces and she's actually being vulnerable. There's no vulnerability in this song. She just wanted to dunk on her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend who she thinks stole him from her. Better Than Revenge was kind of a self-own in hindsight. This was before she had her girl boss feminism, girls supporting girls, don't pit women against women awakening. And the secret message to this song is You Thought I Would Forget, which is vaguely menacing. It's pretty widely known that this song is about Camila Bell, the girl who stole Joe Jonas from her. And we can see that it is about her because she makes a reference to a song that the Jonas Brothers put out after they broke up called Much Better. The refrain leading out of the song is, show me how much better you are. You deserve some applause. She took him faster than you could say sabotage. Taylor, if your man can stray, if your man can be pulled away, he wasn't your man to begin with. I think we can start there. Also, there are some bizarre lyrics in here. There's no amount of vintage dresses that give you dignity. It's just funny because Taylor spent an entire era after this song came out wearing nothing but vintage dresses. So what does that say about you if this is the standard that you're holding other women to? But Better Than Revenge is a fun song. I mean, there's a reason why there's a meme called Feminism Off Better Than Revenge on. And it's worth it to note that when this came out, what did we do? We attacked Camille Bell. We savagely and ruthlessly went after her. She was getting called a whore and a slut on a daily basis. And who led the charge? Taylor Swift. She had her pitchfork. She was ready. She was leading the girls into attack another girl, which is very not girl squad, girl boss, gaslight, gatekeep of her. Very strange behavior for the woke girl that we know her to be today. But of course, things change over time, and she has since expressed regret for writing a song like that. She's addressed it directly, I believe, during Red or 1989. She gave an interview where she expressed much regret for writing a song like this, although she has never directly apologized to Camille Bell publicly, from my knowledge, and I feel as though that might actually be in order. Either way, Better Than Revenge is fun in that it is a confession. It's a look into maybe an uglier part of her brain that she shouldn't have revealed to the world. Track 11 is Innocent, which is 5 minutes long, and I think that's probably about 2.5 minutes too long. This song could have been edited down, but again, we're going with the kind of sprawling, free-ranging stream of consciousness theme on Speak Now. So Innocent's secret message is life is full of little interruptions, which is personally one of my favorite nuggets in the Taylor Swift universe, because she has a framed photo of this incident at the 2009 VMAs that she's referencing, with Kanye West interrupting her winning an award, framed in her house. It's a continuation, or kind of the first full public address that she made post the incident on stage. Taylor's had better, more successful, more creative takedowns than this one, and it's a little bit backhanded. She's forgiving him, but she's also admonishing and scolding him. So I don't really get what she was trying to do with this song. I think if it was just an album track and it was left there, it would be fine, but she insisted on performing this at the VMAs when she had a perfectly good song, Mine, out and about, ready to promote, that, to be honest, was struggling on the charts and needed a little bit of a push. She instead decided to sing a song that was as yet unreleased from Speak Now, which was Innocent. And I think it was just because Kanye West was also performing that night. And unfortunately, he completely overshadowed her by doing an insane performance, and Taylor ended up looking a little silly, a little bitter. It wasn't really necessary for her to go into this when she was promoting a record that was about so much more than this incident. But I understand her PR brain. She was trying to capture some momentum, restart the conversation, which is why it's a little dishonest to constantly frame the 2009 VMA incident as something that was absolutely terrible and had no benefit to her whatsoever. I don't agree that Kanye West made her famous, but I also don't agree that this incident had nothing to do with her becoming an even bigger star. But with that aside, there are some truly beautiful lyrics in this bridge that I like just from a writerly standpoint. They sound beautiful. Time turns flames to embers. You'll have new Septembers. Beautiful. The overarching message of this song is very patronizing. And if you think about it, you're still an innocent sounds like, the way she says it in the song, the way she phrases it, you're stealing innocence, which is a very Swiftian thing to do, to forgive someone but also stab the knife in because she hasn't really forgiven them yet. Track 12 is Haunted, which, is probably an underrated song from Speak Now. The arrangement and the instrumentation on this song is truly outstanding. There is a beautiful string part, there's an organ, it's very dramatic, it's gothic, it's a vocal showcase. She really kind of gets into it in the bridge, and the live performance of this on the Speak Now tour is truly wonderful. I think that Haunted has a message that has been conveyed better in other Taylor Swift songs, that feeling of being stuck in an emotional process that hasn't quite made its way through you. I'm thinking of Right Where You Left Me here. Obviously that came very many years later, but I think that these songs are spiritually linked in a way. Haunted is very interesting. I think that this also could have had an excellent visual, but I didn't get any of the visuals that I wanted from this record. But yeah, not much to say about Haunted other than that it's kind of a banger and the instrumentation is really wonderful. Track 13 is Last Kiss, and this is one of my favorite Taylor Swift songs of all time. It is 6 minutes long and it is devastating. It's catastrophic. The secret message to Last Kiss is forever and always, and there is absolutely no way that I could make it through this video without discussing the Holy Trinity. So the Holy Trinity is a succession of 3 Taylor Swift songs that are all linked to one another and are about the same emotion. So it starts with, or the same relationship rather. It starts with Forever and Always, it goes into Last Kiss, and it ends with Holy Ground. And if you think of those songs in relation to each other and the progression that they develop, it's very beautiful, and it's very indicative of who you are when you're in your 20s and trying to figure out navigating that transition from teenager and adolescent to young adulthood, which is exactly what this album is all about. But yeah, so that is the secret message for this song, and I feel like it really informs the way you look at it when you know the story and you know what the procession of songs is with the Holy Trinity. This song, I mean, the lyrics say, "I'll go sit on the floor wearing your clothes." And you can picture her there, kind of like in Never Grow Up. You can picture her there on her floor wearing her ex-boyfriend's sweater and just yearning and wanting so badly to be something that he might miss enough to pick up the phone and call her and let him know that he cares about her, that he once cared greatly for her. This song is kind of a despondence. She's really at the bottom of everything. She doesn't know what to do with herself. She's gormless. She's listless. She's calling friends and disguising her intentions just to kind of see if she can get some juice on what he's doing now. Not even to see if there's another chance, just to feel as though tangentially, somehow, she can remain a part of his life. She hasn't quite figured out how to deal with this Joe Jonas-shaped hole in her life. It's confusing to her. It's heart-wrenching. It's placed her at the bottom of her feelings. And the kind of diaristic, rambling, there's a very tour bus vibe to this. You can hear kind of the wheels going and the objects on the bus rolling around. Last Kiss is kind of a moving meditation. It's very similar to Sad, Beautiful, Tragic in that way. It has a truly heartbreaking bridge with a beautiful vocal take that has a very shaky sigh and inhalation that, still gets me to this very day. And every year at 1:58, the Swifties be posting Lit Through the Darkness at 1:58. It had its moment. That was a bit of a ramble, but Last Kiss is truly one of the greatest songs on Speak Now and of the discography in general. Track 14 and the end of the standard edition of Speak Now is Long Live, and Long Live is a love letter to the fans, to her band, and I'd like to take a moment and compare it to Change, which is on Fearless. I mean, Long Live is definitely a superior version of Change, though they are kind of the same song in that Taylor is patting herself and her bandmates and her label on the back a little bit for being in kind of a David and Goliath situation. This song is very euphoric. It has a rousing, anthemic feel to it, and I know that the Swifties get their life singing this whenever it comes on. The Speak Now performance of this is beautiful with the sparkly guitar. It ties a lot of narratives together, and I think it's personally better than Change. It does the same thing, but it does it in a better way. Then we go on to the deluxe editions. I will not be talking about the different arrangements of different songs. There's an acoustic version of Back to December and a piano version of Haunted, and I believe a pop mix of Mine, which should be avoided at all costs. I'm just going to get into the bonus track. So Ours is the first bonus track, and again, this is a beautiful, perfect, sweet, endearing song. This goes to the swooning part of her career. She is being optimistic. She's being hopeful. She's being defensive towards her lover, against the people, the outsiders, the naysayers. She's choosing love, and she's choosing to be hopeful and optimistic, even if the cards and the circumstances are not lining up in her favor. She is smothering this person with love. She is reassuring them, don't worry, people throw rocks at things that shine, which is a beautiful lyric, one of the best on Speak Now, actually. And also, she did a performance of this at the Country Music Awards during the tail end of the Speak Now album campaign, and it is beautiful. It is wonderful. You should look it up. But this song, again, there's an intimacy and a confessional element to this song that I really love, and it sounds like a lullaby almost. So love Ours, wonderful song. Up next is If This Was a Movie. Now, if you know me, you know that this is one of my favorite Taylor Swift songs of all time. I have no real kind of artistic justification for it other than it just slaps, okay? It goes off. It's a banger. It's desperate. It's longing. It's wistful. It kind of sounds like a Fearless song. It reminds me of Mr. Perfectly Fine in a certain way. But the vocals on this are wonderful. The pleading, the begging, the hypothesizing that it all leads up to at the very end. I mean, this is a cinematic song. I can picture her at the very end, running down the street in the rain, begging, showing up to her boyfriend's house, banging on the door, pleading, come back to me, like you would if this was a movie. Again, it kind of goes back into Taylor's obsession and fixation on made-up worlds, fantasies, movies, characters, fairy tales, archetypes, her reliance on those things to inform the way that these totally random events happen to her in life. We have Superman. I'm really not going to get into it too much because I think that this is the bad song I was saying on Speak Now. This song is juvenile. It is not really worth your time if you've never listened to it before. It doesn't move the story along, and it sounds like a Kidz Bop tune. So I will not be expanding on that any further. So what kind of cultural impact did this album have, and what kind of impact did it have on her career? I think that in general, Speak Now was a stepping stone in a transitional work. And like I mentioned before, because of that, and because there weren't any standout radio memorable singles, it often gets overlooked when we're reviewing Taylor's progression as an artist. But I think that you can't view her holistically without considering Speak Now as one of the building blocks of the artist that she's become today. Speak Now is more similar in spirit to Folklore and Evermore than any of her pop records like Lover or Reputation or 1989. And arguably, Speak Now, which she wrote when she was 19, 20 years old, is lyrically more complicated, honest and sincere than Lover, than Reputation, probably even than 1989. It really is, you know, the undiscovered supermodel of the Taylor Swift discography. She won 2 Grammys in this album cycle, both for Mean, which, I mean, whatever. I really think that Speak Now should have won Album of the Year, but I digress. It wasn't on the cards. It didn't have the impact, the cultural impact that her other albums had. It didn't kind of penetrate the mainstream in a way that really shook the world. But I think that Speak Now also showed a real evolution and advancement in her talent. She worked on her voice a lot. The tour that she followed up the Fearless tour with, the Speak Now tour, was higher production value. It had more elements, more moving parts. She played more instruments. She played with different arrangements of her songs. She pushed herself. She challenged herself to incorporate a bit of choreography and to hit those high notes consistently and deliberately. She wasn't always slaying it with the live performances for the Speak Now album. I think, again, she gets nervous for her award shows and for live televised things where not everyone in the audience is necessarily on her side. But I think overall, like, this was a huge step forward in many different ways. It also was her growing up, and this was kind of a goodbye to the old Taylor. You know, Taylor made a distinction between the old Taylor and the new Taylor in Reputation, but I would argue that the old Taylor and the new Taylor begins at the end of Speak Now, because Red was truly a tonal shift and also a perspective shift and a move into a different kind of music and a different kind of celebrity. Speak Now is a writerly literary work, probably the richest and juiciest text that we have from Taylor. There's plenty to get into that I probably haven't even touched in this video, but I hope that you liked it, and I would love to hear what you think about Speak Now. What place do you think this holds in Taylor's reputation? How do you think people are going to respond to it going forward? If you're a new fan, I would love to know what your perspective is on Speak Now. Obviously, I experienced all of these albums as they were happening, so I have a good idea of how they went, but I would love to hear how these things are being metabolized by a younger, new generation of her fans. Do you guys like this? What are your favorite songs? How does it stack up to your other favorite albums? Do you prefer her newer stuff? I would love to know. And if you're an old-time Swiftie like me, you can let me know if you agree with me, what songs you like, what stood out to you. I would love to hear from you. So make sure to check out my podcast and follow me on Instagram. That's all I've got for you today, Swifties, and I hope that you have a wonderful week.